function leaders, and function leaders are Stan, who takes care of all of our sound and doing all those sorts of things. Our membership person, who was Patricia Gracian, and I am going to be our membership person going forward. Okay. I've been your leader. You know what's coming tonight. Very exciting event. Then we have 6 issue organizing teams, IOTs, that is for actually addressing the issues that PDA has set forth as being very important in our day. And so I'm going to ask our IOT leaders to identify themselves first. So if you'd raise your hand. Okay. All right. Let's go here and give everybody your name and what IOT you're on.
My name is Barb Catedra, and I am the Healthcare Not Warfare team leader.
Okay. And Sandy.
I'm Sandy Arsham. I'm on the Clean, Fair, Transparent, Accurate Elections.
Very good. Thank you, Sandy. And Greg Bolian is also on the team, and I think he's going to be here tonight. Sal?
I'm on that same team.
Clean, Fair, Transparent Elections, Sal Magallanes. Okay. Patsy and Larry?
Economic justice
And social.
Good. Economic and social justice. And we have somebody missing tonight, 2 people missing tonight. And that's Cheryl Eade and Michael Lengel. They are our Stop Global Warming team leaders. But we also, they address the issues. We also have congressional district point persons, 1 for each congressional district in the county, and that's why you still see some people standing, and some people will stand twice. Okay, Carlos, why don't you tell them who you are?
I'm Carlos Richardson, the CA 50 point person.
Thank you, Carlos. And I'm Judy Hess, and I'm the CA 51 Congressional District point person.
Sal Magallanes, I'm the 52nd point person. We're trying to get rid of Hunter.
Yay! And
Matt
Matt?
Duncan, I'm the 53rd district point person, and we're trying to figure out what to do with Susan.
Yay! Okay, and we'll get quick reports from each of these folks. And finally, we're going to have a new leader tonight. So we got guys still left standing. Who are you? Mike Copass, our new leader. When we're drawing down the meeting, when we're coming to a close, I'll be passing the imaginary gavel to Mike, and he'll finish up the meeting tonight. All right. HR 5056, the National Advisory Board's Beverly has introduced this piece of legislation to appoint a special envoy to Iran to ease tensions. There are 16 co-sponsors, including Lynn Walsey, Maxine Waters, and John Conyers. Okay? So that's a good one, too. Finally, impeachment. Do we hear impeachment? I'm sure you know that Dennis introduced a new article. Policy will allow a hearing and not impeachment itself. To support impeachment, go to the very top of our national website.
It's touchscreen, just click.
Click here. I mean, it's at the top of the top. And remember, once you've done one, the form's populated for you, and all you need to do is a single click.
Is that it?
Pardon?
Yeah.
Yeah. That ends my IoT report. Oops. Michael Lengel and Cheryl aren't here, so we will be skipping Stop Global Warming. Sal, do you have a report?
Yeah, I'll stay something for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Sal. Here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the CA 52 person, and as I said before, we're trying to get rid of Duncan Hunter. The senior is actually retiring this year, so he's got the heir apparent in the waiting, Duncan Jr. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and this is a question from Sandy. She said, "What do we do with when we have a Republican light running as a Democrat?" Okay. Well, it's true. We have Mike Lumpkin, who defeated PDA-endorsed Vicki Butcher. Now, one of the things I think we need to understand as PDA is we need to understand how the Democratic Party works so that this doesn't happen. Now, they're going to have the same problem up in the 51st District, 52nd? 50th with Nick Lee. Okay? We're having basically Republican-like people. If you haven't heard Mike Lumpkin speak, he came here in January to speak to us.
December.
Was it December? I thought it was okay. In December, and some of the answers were just, you would have fallen back on your seat, I swear. I mean, it was that bad. And he didn't even bother to come by and ask for the endorsement from PDA because he knew he wasn't going to get it. So, but now, what happens? The Democratic Party endorsed him as the candidate, and then all the GO team members, people who get out the vote team members, could not take any literature for any other candidate. Democratic Party forced everybody to take out literature for Mike Lumpkin. So that left Vicki Butcher without any support. Okay? So what I'm saying is, we as a group need to start to understand how the Democratic Party works so that this does not happen again, because we're going to have to go through this in 2 years, and hopefully it won't be Duncan Jr. running, okay, or in office. Any questions?
I'm going to come to the point very quickly. Patch and I were the original volunteer coordinators for the Leave Him campaign, but as we heard more and more and got around with it more and more, we had to drop out. And as it turned out, we had to even leave the Democratic Party leadership of the club we were in because we couldn't campaign against them. I intend to campaign against them. They go on the idea that you have no place else to turn to. You're going to have to accept them. And the other thing is the way the elections run. I ran for the Central Committee and just got edged out. But the thing is that there were about 56 super delegates that vote for the nominee. In other words, the people who are eligible to vote for who shall represent us are the leaders of the clubs and those officials in the party here, a total of 82. So out of 106,000 Democrats, you had something like 42 electing Nick Leaveham. Okay? And there's something should be done about that. Because it's not like the Democratic Party nationwide, we have 800 super delegates. Here you have 100% superdelegates selected. And it doesn't matter how the club votes. The leaders of the club can vote any way they wish. And that's how it is.
And I stepped down for a good reason. I challenged Susan Davis in the Democratic primary in the 53rd district. There is a congressional recess. I think it is August 11th to about the Labor Day weekend, and PDA members will accompany the point person to go meet with Representative Davis at a time that we'll schedule. So Mac is currently the point person. I will plan to attend that meeting as well. And we'd like to have a big PDA presence. I know there's a lot of you that have a lot of issues, and you may, so let's circle up and decide what we'd like to lobby Representative Davis for, and let her know that the progressive presence and voice continues. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. And what he's got to say, though, is so important that we just had to have him come on and talk with us. So, Walter Davis, would you come and join me up here? He's going to talk to us about progressives must be their own media, advances in webcast technology. He's with San Diego County Community Coalition. Please welcome Walter.
Okay, I want to try to be very brief, because I know that the hook is going to come out and get me if I...
That's me.
Yeah, I know, I'm already briefed on that part of it. We've made some very dramatic advances with the San Diego County Community Coalition. I just wanted to make you aware of it, because we're extending our advances out to the entire progressive community throughout San Diego. We now have 3 public access television shows, which means we have 1 hour and a half on cable television every single month. That equates to 6 individual interviews, and we can stretch that to 9 if we had to. So that what that means is that PDA could actually come on and send representatives that were concerned about the environment or the election, and I can interview for up to 28 minutes on the cable television channel 18 in North County, and channel 23 here in southern San Diego on Cox Communications. I've completed my producer training with Cox Communications, and I have 2 shows now. One of them is the Lee Smith Cooper Community Issues, A Tapestry of Concerns. It comes on at 6 p.m. Every Sunday on Cox Communications. I'm also now beginning to do work with Time Warner. So the reason I'm telling you this is that I'm staffing my shows with activists. So the camera people, the engineers, they are activists. They're progressive people. So I need more people. Right now I have 2 teams trained. I need 18. So if you want to get trained, and believe me, 10-year-olds can do it. We had some teenagers come out last month, and they watched the camera operation under supervision. They did some work the first time, but the second show, they did it by themselves. They ran the engineering. The whole thing was run by teenagers. So don't give me the dang that I'm technophobic and I can't do it. You can do it. We have little kids doing it, so you can do it too. I'm primarily focused on previously convicted people. So I'm giving them some positive bullets for their resumes, because these people are being thrown away. They're saying, you got charged with drugs, so you're no good. Check the box. You can't get hired. So I'm bringing in previously convicted people so that they can say that they were producers, are producers on these TV shows. However, having said that, I need your support as well. Our next broadcast recording will be on the 1st of August at 6 o'clock at the Cox Communication Studio in El Cajon. That's 1277 Cuyamaca. So please come out so we can get you trained, and imagine progressives having an hour and a half on television every month. We can cover the environment. It's under our control. We can't go in there and say we're part of the Democratic Party, but you can say you're part of the San Diego County Community Coalition. You see how that works? So it's a huge advantage, and we also have hundreds of hours of webcasting. So as you know, I have my little camera here, but I can broadcast around the entire world with this camera. I have hundreds of hours to do interviews. I'll just talk about the interviews, or rather the speeches that were made here in February, December. Imagine being able to go back and just watch them. So we were transmitting these meetings that we're having now. Everybody would be able to watch that. Even people in North County would be able to watch this meeting. And there would be archive for you to go back and watch and see exactly what the candidate said. Wouldn't be any secondary guessing and people explaining. You would be able to go back and watch what the candidate said at the endorsement meetings. Now, the other exciting part of this is that we have a new piece of technology, and guess whose hands is in? And the progressives. I got some scientists, and we have this new device that actually allows us to put webcasts onto your television set. So you don't have to have a computer to watch webcasts and podcasts now. We have this new device that puts that particular video on, so you can watch YouTube on your TV set.
Wow.
So you can press it turns your remote into a cursor. You can actually go around. You can go to different websites. It's kind of like the web TV thing, but only it's fast enough to take video. So you can watch movies on this, the whole 9 yards. So what that means is that each organization can have separate television stations as part of this system. You see where I'm coming from? I can't really explain it to you clearly right now, because I'm going to get the hook pulling me off the stage in a few minutes. But we do have the Community Coalition meetings the 3rd Sunday of every month at the Joyce Mears Community Center at 6 p.m. So we have a meeting this coming Sunday. I've got flyers regarding that right here.
Is it a webcast?
I'm sorry?
Is it a webcast?
It can be, yes. I will webcast it as well. I've got a blog, so we have a blog where, let's say, for example, you get information on a topic. You can email that topic into the blog, in other words. it's important for us to all start working together. I did some work with Congressman Filner, and he said, I kept asking him, what about healthcare? What about Blackwater? What's Congress doing? And his statement to me was, you have to form the parade, and then I will get in front of it. So if we don't all come out in large numbers, if we don't, I go all over the county, and I see little groups like this doing great work, but if we don't all come together as one big group, we're not going to have any power, and we're going to keep losing elections, and we're going to keep on whining, and nothing is going to happen. So we all have to work together. That's what the coalition is all about. You guys maintain your own identity, but please come out and support us in the coalition meeting on the third Sunday of each month. Our meeting is going to be this coming Sunday, and again on the 17th of August. And if you have questions about becoming part of my broadcast on the 1st of August, let me know, and you'll be more than welcome to be trained to become part of that. So with that, for the broadcast?
No, for the
coalition, 6 p.m. on Sunday. 6 p.m. the third Sunday. Thanks to San Diego's 9/11 Truth, we have the George Beers Center, so I really appreciate their donation of that. And I'm putting this in my pocket, so I need your help, to kind of get it going. I have 3 studios, by the way, for recording. I have HD world-class recording studios, so this is not any kind of, just put together stuff. This is really professional, and we got professional engineers working with us, okay? So thank you.
Now I come to the very special part of our program, and I want to say just a word or two about somebody who's really special to me, and I've asked him to actually introduce our guest. That's Tom Corbett, and Tom has just been a beacon in terms of election protection. He's a genius where it comes to knowing what the laws are. He knows about the machines. I don't know these things, okay? But that's okay, because we have people like Tom who are wonderful translators, okay? But Tom was part of the founding, our chapter. We were part of the founding of the CA50 Action Committee, of which I was the coordinator, when we brought the lawsuit against the registrar and Brian Bilbray in the Must Be Bilbray race. And that's, I think, how Tom and I met, and we've been in touch ever since, and I'm still on the list. Excuse me, I have a hard time reading it. But anyway, I want you to welcome somebody very, very special from Riverside County, Tom Corbett.
Thank you very much, Judy. The concept being that transparency does not exist in most counties, not only in California, but throughout the United States. Dr. Richard Hayes-Phillips holds 4 different degrees, very few of which he uses. He's a trailblazer, literally and figuratively. He's a very accomplished musician, and he spent 3 years plus investigating the Ohio 2004 presidential election process in some very specific counties in the state of Ohio. Ohio, of course, being the swing state that resulted in the selection of George W. Bush. You'll notice there was an S in front of that word. And Richard is going to show you here, if he's ready to start, he's going to show you what kinds of documents, over 30,000 documents that he photographed during this 3-year period, that make it clear, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, irrefutable evidence that the election for the President of the United States in 2004 was stolen. And with that, Dr. Richard Hayes-Phillips. Thank you.
Thank you. I truly couldn't have done this tour without Tom. He set almost all of it up. I'm used to coming to California on my own, trying to set up dates in small cafes as a musician, and this is a whole different situation, and I'm really grateful for it. This is the best turnout we've had so far. Thank you. This presentation is going to be a lot different than the others, not just because I have a bit less time, but because Kyle Cuyahoga County, Ohio has foisted Michael Vu upon you. And I will give a special emphasis to Cuyahoga County tonight without giving too short shrift to the other corrupt counties in Ohio. I never sought to be an election fraud investigator. I used to have a life. A peaceful, idyllic life as an acoustic folk musician, as a trailblazer and trail maintenance worker in the mountains of New York and North Carolina, which I have not given up. But I haven't been able to tour since October 2004, and you might guess why. 10 days after the election, I received an email unsolicited from a mountaintop in Pennsylvania from a woman I'd never heard of who had gotten my address in a roundabout way. And she sent out numbers from the home page of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections website that were clearly wrong. And I called up the Board of Elections, and they told me not to worry about it. It was only data entry errors that didn't carry over into the vote totals for the candidates. So naturally, being a curious person, I downloaded the vote totals for the candidates, precinct by precinct, in the biggest county in Ohio. It took 4 hours on my dial-up access computer. And the first thing I noticed was that in certain inner-city precincts in Cleveland, there were extraordinary percentages of votes that had turned up in the columns of third-party candidates I'd never heard of. 30% in one precinct from Michael Badnarik, 40% from Michael Perutka in another precinct. So I downloaded the results from 2000 as a comparison, and saw that these were precincts that had voted overwhelmingly for Al Gore, 92, 95, 98%. So these were clearly Kerry votes that were being lost. This made me a witness to a crime with a duty to investigate it and report it. So I was put in touch with the Columbus Free Press and was immediately alerted to the reason for those very long lines at the polls in Columbus. It turned out that the Board of Elections, under the leadership of Matthew Damschroeder, who also used to be the chairman of the county Republican Party, had withheld 122 voting machines in Franklin County, mostly from precincts in Columbus, one of the top Democratic strongholds in the state. And this was the cause for the long lines. Too few voting machines. Some people had to wait for 4 hours to vote. I don't think I would do that. It wasn't hard to figure out what the vote total would have been if the machines had been distributed equitably and the turnout had been as high in Kerry wards as in Bush wards. I calculated that the discriminatory allocation of voting machines shaved 17,000 votes off of Kerry's margin of victory in Columbus, Ohio. The Columbus Dispatch said, no, we think it's more like 15,000 votes. That's the closest the mainstream media has come to examining my work and verifying it. And we heard other stories early on, which I won't detail here. I wrote 21 papers in about 6 weeks, submitted them to the Ohio Supreme Court in hopes of challenging the election. We never got a hearing. We never got to depose witnesses. We never got to engage in discovery. As it happens, the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, Thomas Moyer, under Ohio law, gets to decide for himself whether or not to hear an election challenge. And since we were already challenging his election as well, I was a little it really had the appearance of impropriety. After Barbara Boxer and a number of members of Congress challenged the election on the floor of the House, I retreated for a while. I did a few papers on the Ohio election for national conferences. But it wasn't until the spring of 2006 that the Ohio Attorney General, Jim Petro, ruled that the ballots were, in fact, public record. At that point, I started submitting public records requests to the most suspect counties in Ohio, including, I think, 4 the first day, one of which was Cuyahoga County. I will start here by showing you some ballots. These are punch card ballots from Cleveland. And this will explain to you how votes for Kerry ended up in the columns of other candidates. This is one of 2 precincts that voted in the same polling place. The first column on the left is the presidential column. The presidential candidates are numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. As you can see, their names are not on the punch card ballots. They're actually on booklets that are attached to the machines. And there are names and arrows pointing to the hole that you're supposed to punch for that candidate. Under Ohio law, the order, the sequence in which candidates' names appear on the ballot must rotate from precinct to precinct, even in the same polling place. Voters in numerous polling places in Cleveland and also in Akron were allowed to go to a vacant booth or to the shortest line, even if it was the wrong precinct. So they would take punch cards where, in this case, in this precinct, a punch for number 2 was a punch for Kerry. But if they brought it to the wrong voting machine, where number 6 was a punch for Kerry, and then put it in the correct ballot box, that vote will be counted for Michael Perutka. Next slide. Same polling place, stack of cards for the other precinct, and on the CD that comes with the book, we've got the back sides of the ballots photographed as well. You can see which precincts these are. This is the other precinct, where a punch for number 6 is for John Kerry, and a punch for number 2, if they went to the wrong machine, is for Michael Badnarik. In these 2 precincts, more than 400 votes shifted from Kerry to Badnarik. The next slide shows you cards from Precinct 6M, where Kerry was in position number 8. But in the other voting machine in this polling place, Kerry was in position number 10. So if voters went to the wrong machine and punched number 10, that vote would be counted for Ralph Nader. Now, Ralph Nader was disqualified from the ballot by order of the court. And so, in this precinct, more than 80 votes turned up in the column for candidate disqualified, and were officially reported as undervotes. No vote for president, because the tabulators were programmed to count the Nader column as 0. And we had no way of proving that votes were migrating from Kerry to Nader without looking at the ballots. And it took us 1.5 years to have a look. The next slide shows you the other precinct in the same polling place, where a punch for number 10 was a punch for Kerry, but if you brought your card to the wrong voting machine, where Kerry was in position number 8, once you put it in the right stack, your vote would be counted for George W. Bush. we found about 80 of these ballots too. 80 votes migrating in one direction for one precinct and the other direction for the other precinct. How do we know Bush didn't earn these votes? Because he got about 80 votes among the regular ballots in this precinct and exactly 2 among the absentee ballots, which were punched in the privacy of people's homes. Now, Cuyahoga County doesn't count their absentee ballots at the precinct level. They don't want you to be able to compare regular ballots with absentee ballots. They count absentees in what they call super precincts. They dump them all into boxes of about 4,000 ballots according to legislative district. If you're in a certain combination of congressional, state senate, and state assembly districts, then you're in that super precinct. I had to paw through about 4,000 ballots to pull out the absentee ballots for 14 precincts in order to do this analysis. I would have gotten more. But Michael Boo's deputy, Gwen Dillingham, when she saw what I was doing, under the watchful eye of a Republican and a Democrat, went absolutely ballistic and ordered them not to let me touch the ballots ever again. So I didn't get to look at any more absentee ballots. I only got 14 precincts, but it was enough to prove this case. And by the way, I also obtained, through Vicki Lovegren, a longtime activist in Cleveland, a spreadsheet from the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections for every precinct, showing how many voters and their names and addresses, how many voters actually requested absentee ballots and how many filled them out and whether or not they were returned in a timely manner. And in 4 or 5 of these precincts where I got hold of the absentee ballots, there were too many of them. We photographed more ballots identified for those precincts, more absentee ballots than the total number issued to the voters and returned in a timely manner. This is called ballot box stuffing. And they could get away with that because of their super precincts. Because you had the absentee votes were not reported at the precinct level. The next slide is a pink memo sheet from one of the voter signature books in Cuyahoga County. They're supposed to write up any unusual occurrence. Usually it's a voter spoiled the ballot and asked for a new one. Well, look at this. 11 o'clock, inspector override, vote at any vacant booth. 4 o'clock, inspector came back, instructed voter to vote at precinct. They don't have roving inspectors in Cuyahoga County. Nobody at the Board of Elections had any idea who this person was. The poll worker knew very well that this was wrong, that voters needed to go to the correct voting booth, and that's why she wrote this down and signed her name on the back. So, one of the things we noticed right away in Cleveland, actually, you should go to the next slide before I go on.
At the bottom it says judges were not equipped for presidential election.
Yeah, right. One of the things that I noticed right away was that at the time John Kerry conceded, there were not just 155,000 provisional ballots still to be counted. There were also 93,000 regular ballots still to be counted. J. Kenneth Blackwell didn't tell us that. But by the sophisticated statistical technique called subtraction, I compared the total ballots cast with the total votes counted for president in each county and realized there were 93,000 ballots that had not been counted for president. That seemed like a lot in such a hotly contested race. And I seemed to be the only one who wanted to look at these ballots. People simply assumed these would be hanging chads and dimpled chads. And I wrote up a paper early on showing that many of them, not all, but many of them came from inner city precincts, heavily concentrated in precincts that had voted overwhelmingly for John Kerry. As especially Cuyahoga County, where there were more than 60 precincts that had voted in the aggregate 12-1 for John Kerry, which had high numbers of uncounted ballots. Well, it turned out that the reason for this, the reason for most of the uncounted ballots in the inner cities of Ohio were these double punches. These are ballots actually from Cincinnati. There's a punch for John Kerry. There's a punch for Michael Badnarik. Or rather, Michael Perutka. Over here, here's a punch for Kerry and a punch for Michael Badnarik. Now, I'm sure there are some voters who make this mistake, who vote for two candidates for president, one of whom they've never heard of before, but I don't think it'd be too many. We have complaints in the forms of affidavits and filed on the Election Protection website from voters who swear that they were given punch cards already punched for president. One of these voters in Cuyahoga County brought her ballot to the table and asked for a new one, and it too was already punched for president. More than half of these uncounted ballots in the inner city precincts that we audited were double punched in the most heavily Democratic precincts. If you voted for Bush, you'd be ruining your vote as well. But most of the voters were voting for Kerry, or thought they were. The next slide will show you the same thing in Dayton, double punches. And these ballots don't exist anymore. The director and deputy director barged into the room while I was photographing these and said they changed their mind, they weren't going to let me photograph the evidence. And even after receiving an order from a federal judge instructing them to preserve the ballots and protect them from destruction, Montgomery County went ahead and shredded all their ballots, used, spoiled, unused, all of them. The only county in Ohio to destroy all their ballots after receiving the order from the federal judge. The next slide shows this. Whoops. The next slide shows the same thing in Akron. Double punches for president. These were separated out. We wanted to photograph the undervotes and overvotes. The next slide shows it in Warren City and Trumbull County. The next slide shows them in Canton, in Stark County. By the way, that's a remake. Boards of elections in Ohio are allowed to remake ballots that the tabulator doesn't seem to be reading properly. They're supposed to keep the spoiled ballots that are allegedly being duplicated, but no county could produce them for us. There's not even any punches on this. I'm not really clear why it was necessary to remake it. You'll notice, though, there are 3 punches at the bottom. Every punch card in every precinct in Ohio has these. They're the same pattern. They signify absolutely nothing. But they would serve to obfuscate an extra punch in the presidential column. All ballots in Ohio were pre-punched. The question is whether they had 3 punches or 4. Now, this wasn't done by the Board of Elections. Punch card ballots arrive at the boards in shrink-wrapped pads of 100 or more, and they get sent on to the polling places the same way. Any crime scene investigator looks for motive, means, and opportunity. The boards of elections did not have the opportunity to pre-punch these ballots. It would have to have been done before the ballots were mailed to the boards of elections, which would explain why we saw the same pattern in 8 urban counties in Ohio. Before I go on, I want to point out that this book, which is available only in person or by mail order or online, thanks to my broken publishing contract, has 7 complete chapters on Cuyahoga County and other chapters that address Cuyahoga County in part. I will paw through the table of contents and make sure I hit on these topics.
Available at Witnesstoacrime.com, by the way.
Indeed. Witnesstoacrime.com is my website. I was very fortunate to be able to obtain that name. So we have my original paper called Stealing Votes in Cleveland, which first noticed the migration of votes to columns of other candidates, and also pointed out that the official turnout was as low as 7% in some precincts. And the signature books confirm this. The Board of Elections said, oh, that was a largely Hispanic precinct, and they didn't know how to speak English, and there was no way there to help them, and they must have put their punch cards in backwards. You know, I found that explanation really offensive. First of all, the punch cards on the backside say in great, big, bright, orange block letters the word stop. And then it says wrong side, turn card over. I think a lot of these voters probably had driver's licenses, and I hope they can read a stop sign. To say that only 7% of the registered voters knew to put their card in the right way when you've only got two choices is a bit like saying they scored a lot less than 50% on a true-false test. But the real evidence is there were only 2 undervotes in the whole polling place. So if they had put their punch cards in backward, and the way it's set up, it's not a mirror image. If you put it in backward, you're going to have a whole card full of dimpled chats. You're not going to punch through for anything. That's just the way they're arranged. It's another clue that you've got it in backward. So these would have been counted as undervotes for every single office if that's indeed been what happened. What's much more likely is that there were challengers at the polls who confronted anybody who looked Spanish, and when they couldn't defend themselves, they left without ever having been given a ballot or ever having signed the book. I'm assured that this doesn't happen in California these days, but it does happen in Cleveland. Yeah, we've got another chapter here on uncounted provisional ballots in Ohio. About 1/3 of the provisional ballots in Cuyahoga County were not counted. If you were in the right polling place but at the wrong table because more than one precinct voted in the same polling place, your provisional ballot didn't count. You casted it in the wrong precinct. But as you'll see later, in some of the red counties, you could have been in the wrong county altogether and they'd count your provisional ballot. Yeah, another good one. I did this at the behest of Rolling Stone magazine when I worked with them on the Bobby Kennedy article. Purging the voter rolls in Cuyahoga County. Prior to the 2004 election, there were 168,000 names purged from the voter rolls in Cuyahoga County alone. To put that in perspective, that's 50,000 more than the margin between Bush and Kerry statewide. 64,000 of these names were from Cleveland. 25% of the voters in the whole city. 30% in some wards. Now, most of these people probably really did die or move away, but others just didn't vote in 2000. They weren't interested. And so they'd shown no activity in 4 years, so they were purged from the rolls. And then if they came in and wanted to vote, they were given a provisional ballot, but since they were no longer on the rolls, their ballot didn't count. Now, the reason for purging voter rolls is to make sure nobody votes for somebody who's dead or moved away. But in a computer age, you don't really have to delete the names altogether from a computer. You can put them in a different file and call them inactive. And the percentage of voters purged ought to bear some resemblance to the percentage of people who were registered but didn't vote in the previous presidential election, which usually draws the biggest turnout. So I compared the percentages purged, I compared those percentages ward by ward in Cleveland, town by town, elsewhere in the county, to the percentage of registered voters that didn't vote in 2000. And I found no correlation whatsoever. Rather, there was a much stronger correlation with the percentage of the vote won by Al Gore in 2000. Democratic wards were targeted. Bobby Kennedy believes it was done by zip code. The chairman of the Board of Elections in Cuyahoga County was Bob Bennett, who also happened to be the state chairman of the Republican Party. And the director, of course, was Michael Vu, who now works for you here in San Diego County. I'm sorry. We didn't mean to force them on you. This is why my friend Patty Schaefer says there should be a National Elections Offenders Registry. And their photographs and their addresses should be public, and they shouldn't be allowed within a certain distance of ballots or polling places ever again, because they're beyond reform. They're incorrigible reprobates. Well, that would be nice. Nobody's gone to jail in Cuyahoga County or anywhere else in Ohio. There were 2 indictments, but I believe the convictions were overturned. That was for rigging the recount. You know, plowing through the ballots in advance to pick out precincts where a hand count would match the machine count so that they could go home for Christmas and not have to hand count the whole county. I'm actually more concerned about the rigging of the election itself. I looked at the reasons for low voter turnout in Cuyahoga County, and a lot of it I couldn't explain except by voter suppression. But I did encounter one pretty interesting thing. There were duplicate, triplicate, quadruplicate, even quintuplicate entries in the voter rolls of the same names, the same voters. The way this would generally happen is that volunteers for voter registration groups were paid on a piecemeal basis. They were paid for every application they could convince a voter to fill out, and then when they brought them to the Board of Elections, the data entry system was not set up to detect errors. So if there was any typographical error in the spelling of the name of the voter or in the name of the street or in any of the numbers, whether it's the birthday or the street address or the voter ID number, then the registration would sail right through and now you're on the voter rolls twice. So that really accounted for about 3% of the registrations in Cuyahoga County, so it did depress the official turnout a little bit. By the way, not one of these people voted twice, even though they actually had an opportunity to do so. I know that the Republican Party wants us to believe that voter fraud, people voting illegally, is the biggest threat to the integrity of American elections, but I actually think wholesale rigging of the vote count is much more serious. So I'll tell you one other interesting story about Cuyahoga County, and then zip through some of the slides. We had a little difficulty having a look at the ballots in Cuyahoga County. They held us off for months, I think 10 weeks altogether. And in about the 10th week, there was an email from Gary Barna, the executive assistant to Michael Vu, who said that he remembered boxing up the punch card ballots for the 2004 presidential election, but he couldn't remember where he put them. That would be 687,000 punch card ballots. That's a lot to lose. He thought they might be in the basement in the ballot room, or they might be in the county archives, or he really just couldn't remember. So Adele Eisner barged into the Board of Elections one day just before Vicki Lovegren and I were scheduled to get there. And and walked up to Barna's office with a tape recorder and a camera rolling and said, "I'm here to find the ballots." They're going to take me down to the ballot room now. I can't remember if that's the day they actually saw the door of the ballot room open. Forget double lock and key with one Republican having the key and one Democrat having the other. We found that door open in the basement of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. Well, there are locked cages inside that room, but that's not where the ballots were. Adele found them hidden behind a pallet stacked full with miscellaneous elections records. And she sees this other pallet and says, wait, what's that behind there? And, well, lo and behold, it was the ballots from the 2004 election. My God, they had them all along. And Vicki and I then came in and tore off the shrink wrap. The whole pallet was shrink wrapped as one piece ready to go to the landfill. And we tore off the shrink wrap, turned the boxes around so the labels were facing outward. I knew their code, so I knew which precincts were in which boxes. Yes, they're in code on their website. And we photographed the boxes, left them in place, and came back a few weeks later to do the audit. So no, I don't think Michael Vu should be working for any board of elections. Oh yeah, one other story about Cuyahoga County. Under the directorship of Michael Vu, they switched to Diebold touchscreen machines. Some believe that's why Michael Vu was put in there in the first place. Well, in the 2006 midterm election, here's what the numbers looked like in Cuyahoga County. According to the unofficial results posted on election night, there was an undervote rate of 25% for the most hotly contested offices on the ballot. Governor of Ohio, United States Senator from Ohio. 1 out of 4 voters couldn't decide between J. Kenneth Blackwell and Ted Strickland. 1/4 of the voters couldn't decide between Mike DeWine and Sherrod Brown. By the time the official results came out, Cuyahoga County officially reported 60 precincts with better than 100% turnout. 60 precincts. 1 in Cleveland, the rest in the suburbs. The Diebold tabulators reported better than 100% turnout. More ballots cast than registered voters. In Summit County, where Akron is located, they had ES&S optical scanners. And Summit County reported 110% turnout county-wide. These are the official results, certified by J. Kenneth Blackwell. You can look it up.
About 130% of those were for Republicans.
Don't know. Here's how it happens, though. Both the Diebold tabulators and the ES&S optical scanners are programmed, not hacked, programmed to produce 2 different sets of numbers for ballots cast, and it's that way in San Diego County. I know it because I was sent the results precinct by precinct for the Busby-Bilbray race. There's 2 different sets of numbers reported by these machines for ballots cast. Now, what is the reason for keeping 2 sets of books? The one number may or may not be true. The other one surely isn't. It derives this way. Every page of an absentee ballot is counted as a ballot. So if you've got 2 pages or 3 pages in an absentee ballot, it's going to count as 2 or 3 ballots cast. And not every voter turns in every page of the absentee ballot, so there's no way to correct the numbers. Very convenient. And so if you don't know how many ballots were cast, you don't know if the right number of votes have been counted for the candidates. And you sure don't know if they've been counted for the right candidates. Unless there's a much vaunted paper trail in the touchscreen machine, and the ink doesn't happen to run out during the day, and the paper doesn't happen to get jammed, and you happen to get a look at it. But remember, we didn't get to look at the ballots in Ohio until 2006. So enough on Cuyahoga. I've got a little bit of time left. 10 minutes, yeah. So I'll run through some of these ballots. And start running through some slides. I'm going to skip many of these. That's what the records look like in Miami County, Ohio. You know, this was across the street from the county courthouse. At the powerhouse, the roof caved in and the records all got wet, and they had to drag them across to the other side of the building. But we were given free run of the records. You know, the Republican director of the Board of Elections had no problem with us spending as long as we wanted in Miami County, where 19,000 votes were miraculously added to the totals on election night after 100% of the precincts had reported, and the percentages for the candidates remained unchanged. And so just some quick discrepancies in Miami County, and this is why you need to do a full audit. You can't just do a spot check of randomly selected precincts and recount the ballots. You don't know until you look at the poll book and the voter signature book whether or not you've even got the right number of ballots. You have to know how many voters there were before you start counting the ballots. So, you know, the number of regular ballots, the number of provisional ballots, the number of spoiled ballots where the voter messes it up and asks for a new one, and the number of unused ballots are supposed to add up to the number of ballots issued at the start of the day. That's part of what an election audit is all about. So here's some of the things we found. Here's a precinct where there were no provisional voters at the polls, 0. But the next slide shows 17 provisional ballots counted. Most of them from other counties, people who weren't even registered in Miami County. The next slide shows an altered ballot from Miami County. We found quite a few of these. That's an undervote turned into a vote for Bush. That's not the same mark as the rest of the ballot. This person didn't vote for president, and somebody filled it in for Bush and ran it through the tabulator. Now, Miami County had the lowest percentage of undervotes for president of any county in Ohio. And this might be one of the reasons. Next slide. I picked this precinct because it looked like there were about 100 extra votes for Bush compared to 2,000. It looks like they started with 445 ballots, and we don't know where the other 99 came from. There was one ballot in the spoiled and defaced envelope, and that means that the ballot stub number should be crossed out for that ballot and only for that ballot. And now I need to explain to you right quick about ballot stubs, because you don't do this in California. Ballots come with numbered stubs, perforated strips of paper. The poll workers are supposed to write that stub number in the signature book next to your name. And that stub gets torn off and put in the ballot box separately to protect your right to a secret ballot. And the reason for this is that if somebody wants to audit the election, the numbers on the stubs in the box are supposed to match the numbers in the signature book, and the numbers on the stubs attached to the unused ballots are supposed to not match the stub numbers in the signature book. And if you don't record the ballot stub numbers, none of us have any way of knowing if the ballots we are looking at are the same ones that were issued to the voters. And if those ballots are not counted at the polls, then there's a break in the chain of custody. We don't know what happened to those ballots after they left the polls. And that's why they need to be paper ballots counted by hand at the polling place in full public view on election night, no matter how long it takes. We found altered ballots, fake ballots substituted for real ones, ballot box stuffing, and ballot destruction in Ohio. So here's a precinct with one spoiled and defaced ballot, but here's one page from the signature book on the next slide. Just this page has actually 4 alterations. Here, here, and here there's 2. So I have no way of knowing if these are the ballots that are issued to the voters. Next slide, this is great. This is Tip City F. I mean, how many ballots were issued? How many were counted? I mean, they keep changing the numbers. That's because 106 ballots were dumped in the Tip City F ballot box from another precinct. I picked this precinct because it looked like there were 110 extra votes for Bush. And when we photographed the ballots, being careful to keep them in the sequence that we found them, there was a distinct, abrupt change in the voting pattern halfway through the deck. The next slide shows you what happened. These voters weren't allowed to sign the signature book. Somebody just wrote Tip F in the Tip City J book. And next slide shows that they were forced to sign scrap paper instead. Here's their name, here's their addresses, here's their signature. What happened is we canvassed the precinct. They were herded up like cattle, marched across the street to the wrong polling place, and made to vote there. We had one voter who was still crying about it a year and a half later, saying, I didn't stand in line for an hour and a half to have my vote not count. I knew this isn't where I was supposed to be voting. The next slide shows you the voter signature book from the precinct they were marched to. Notice, no ballot stub numbers. There's no way to verify these ballots. Next slide shows you the ballot accounting chart from the precinct they were marched from. There's no attempt to account for the ballots. They have no idea what happened to them and how many left. So let's run through these. This is the precinct in Miami County where the official turnout was 98.55%. Anybody who's tried to turn out the vote knows that's not possible. And when we compared the official turnout data with the voter signature books, and when the director, Steve Quillen, registered Republican, former military intelligence operative, very sharp man, when he compared the official results to his computerized voter history database, we both reached the same conclusion, that the voter turnout was wrong, not just in this one precinct, but in all 82 precincts in Miami County. Here's a voter signature book, just 2 pages, in the precinct where supposedly all but 10 voters, registered voters, turned up at the polls. There's 13 blanks on these 2 pages alone, so I turned this page into a federal judge. Next slide. They didn't even know which precinct the ballots were from. Was it southeast, southwest? That's just water damage from the roof caving in. Here's an example of one of those counties in southwestern Ohio where John Kerry couldn't even get as many votes as hopelessly underfunded down-ticket candidates whose races didn't draw anywhere near as many votes as president. In Dark County, one of those counties, we audited 9 precincts where Kerry couldn't get as many votes as Ellen Connolly, the candidate for Chief Justice, who ran a close race. But, 1 out of 5 people who voted for president didn't vote for Chief Justice. The presidential candidate should have been leading the ticket. Well, we audited 9 of these precincts, found 70 more ballots than the total number issued to the voters. And some of these were wild cards. There's nothing printed on the back side of the punch card ballots. These could be used in any county on an as-needed basis in a scheme of old-fashioned ballot box stuffing. And we found the ballot box stuffed in all the audited precincts. I'm going to go to the next one. That just takes too long to explain. Go on. Claremont County, another of those Connolly anomaly counties where Kerry couldn't get as many votes as Ellen Connolly. This was their favorite method for rigging the ballots in Claremont County. They put a little white sticker over the Kerry mark and fill it in for Bush. Here's a close-up of it. After Secretary of State Bruner took possession of the ballots, they let us put it up on a window as a light table. You can see the mark behind the Kerry sticker. You can see the mark for Bush is a different writing implement than the marks on the rest of the ballot. There were quite a few of these that the Green, Libertarian, and Democratic observers saw during the recount, but only one of them survived by the time we had a look at the ballots. That's because the board had tried to replace them all with pristine remakes made from their unused ballots. Then they had to go and destroy the unused ballots because they didn't have enough of them left over to survive an audit. Here's another altered ballot from the same county. A vote for Kerry ruined by smearing the mark for another candidate. This actually proves they picked the precincts to be hand-counted in December before the recount. They didn't pick them at random. This is dated 5 days earlier, before the recount. And these are absentee ballots in the machine-counted precincts. They're marked with a rubber stamp smiley face, not attributable to any human being. We found extras of those in all the precincts we audited. These are absentee ballots from the hand-counted precincts. Why are they marked differently? These ballots were mixed together on election night, regular and absentee ballots. They had to know on election night which precincts were going to be hand-counted in December to try to survive a recount, and they left those precincts unmolested, and that's why John Kerry got 10% more votes in these, a greater percentage of votes in these hand-counted precincts than he did in the machine-counted precincts that we audited. And I'll close with the signature books, because I don't have time to go to Warren County. Tell me. Oh, I'll go back to the previous one. Sorry. Whoops. No, you're going forward. No. No, come on. Please go back. Thank you. Does that look like a match to you? Okay, next slide. How about this one? Next slide. How about this one? Her name is Allison, not Alan. Next slide. James Taylor. Does that look like a match to you? I mean, and in Claremont County, in the precincts we audited, they didn't tell us whether the absentee ballots were returned by the voters. Even if every absentee ballot was filled out by the voters and returned in a timely manner, even if every provisional ballot was ruled valid and counted, even if all the signatures are legitimate, we still photographed too many ballots. And those were counted in the official results. The official results had more ballots cast than the number of ballots issued to the voters. If you want to talk to me about Warren County, where they staged a phony level 10 Homeland Security alert, we'll do it informally because we're out of time.
And that's where
I'll share with you that PDA Metro San Diego chapter has just had its second birthday. We're 2 years old. And in that 2 years, we've had, of course, thousands of people come to our meetings. We've had some very special events. We've had enormously wonderful speakers like Marjorie Cohn. She's been to us twice. We've had Elizabeth de la Vega. We had the road show right before the convention with all of the PDA leadership, with Tim Carpenter, Mimi Kennedy, Norman Solomon, Jeff Cohen. Excuse me. We've had some wonderful, wonderful events. Okay. We started out sharing our time with DFA for a few months, and then in January of 2007 we graduated to this room having a meeting of our own. In this short period of time, as you can see, we have our congressional districts fully handled. We have the issue organizing teams fully staffed, and we have a very vibrant chapter. And that's something that couldn't possibly have happened without a lot of hard work. Derek and Nancy Cassidy have been on our leadership team. We have other people on the leadership team who've been with us. And something else that we did as a chapter was we really, really worked hard for 3 very, very, very special congressional candidates in this 2008 primary season. And we expect to see in 2010 probably all 3 of them go to the House of Representatives. They did amazing campaigns. In founding this chapter, I just want you to know how happy I am, how grateful I am, how really humbling it is to see how successful this chapter has become, how much we stand with the Progressive Caucus, how we stand with Tim Carpenter and Norman Solomon and Barbara Lee and Lynn Woolsey and Bob Filner, who's a member of the Progressive Caucus. Okay, this is just so important. It's such important work. And so, again, I want to thank you. And I want to present to you someone that we're so proud of, a candidate that our chapter birthed, and that person ran an amazing and wonderful campaign. When we need to have rotation of leadership. No organization stays alive, healthy, happy, vibrant, with fresh blood and renewed interest unless you have rotation of leadership. That's a very important principle. And I recognize that. And I know that I just love this chapter. I founded the chapter. But I also know that time moves on and so must we. And we can't have old bleeding deacons crying about the way it used to be. Okay? And that's not what we need in this chapter. We need youth, we need vigor, and that's what we're getting. Now, this wonderful candidate who this chapter birthed has agreed to step up to the plate and take on the leadership. And I'm very, very proud to take this imaginary gavel, which I never did bang, but bang at this time and say, attention please, because I want you to congratulate your new leader, Mike Copass.
I'm going to be quite brief because there are questions surely for our speaker. It's a great honor to have Richard Phillips here. The point I want to make is that this group is fantastic, and it has been 2 years, yes? And there has been, the reason it's been a success, you could sort of boil it down to two main factors. One, consistent and dedicated leadership as people have come and gone, and Judy Hess has always been there. And the second is you, the members, the supporters that come and support. And Tim Carpenter, the head of PDA National, knows that this chapter here is one of the most vibrant, growing, successful. It's the chapter he can rely on. He knows he can count on us here. And this is due in such great part to the consistent, patient, behind-the-scenes efforts, painstaking, giving up so much of personal time and even income-generating possibilities, because it's a labor of love, and we owe such a debt of gratitude to Judy Hess for that. I'd like to all I have run for Congress, yes, and may well again. Yet taking on this role is something that I'm not sure will be easy, nor do I think I can equal what Judy has done. I hope merely to add incrementally to the incredible foundation that she has done, and so I'm humbled to be part of the PDA family, and I will promise to do my best. Thank you. Months, and on election day, it dawned kind of gloomy, and it began to rain. It was incredible. There was a cold rain. Have you stood out in the rain before for hours? And we saw voters in the rain for hours, 2 to 3 hours. It's cold. Not umbrellas. People brought hot tea, what they could. There was reports of there was no ballots at a certain precinct, or machines had broken. They were supposed to have 4. They got 3 machines, and 2 of them were broken. And it was all sort of sporadic and anecdotal. And you knew that something was happening. People were not at the right polling place. They had been there they voted for Kennedy there. That was the house there. They'd lived there 50 years, and yet they were off the rolls. their polling place had been moved, and so they went to another place to vote for hours. And somehow all these little anecdotal stories of people losing, sort of being disenfranchised, must have added up to something, but you couldn't put your finger on it. And this man, a scientist, a geomorphologist, when none of the rest of the mainstream media would, took it upon himself to do that research carefully, painstakingly. And I began to read his papers in December of '04. And I'd wait hungrily for them to come out on freepress.org. And it's incredibly inspiring that there are people in this country that are willing to do that, to take the time and invest in themselves to bring this information. John Conyers in Congress was able to bring that report using data that Richard Hayes-Phillips produced. The Robert F. Kennedy Jr. story in I think it's the June 2006, Rolling Stone?
Yeah, June 2006.
Relied in great part on the data. This is the factual basis by which we can establish that an election was stolen. And I'm humbled and grateful that Richard and Phillips has come here. Q&A.
If there is motive, means, and opportunity, and no penalty for cheating, this is never going to stop. There will always be a motive to rig an election and win the count. There will always be a means, whatever method of voting is used. The only thing we can do is to stop the opportunity. That is why the votes have to be counted at the polling place, in full public view on election night, no matter how long it takes. For God's sake, we just suffered through a 2-year-long presidential campaign. We can wait a day or two to find out who really won. And the key is to count them at the polling place. I would rather have lever machines counted at the polling place than paper ballots taken somewhere else and counted downtown. So next question. Okay, I'll give you an example. This is the county I didn't get to. On election night, Warren County, Ohio, came to the attention of the world because of a phony terrorist threat. A lockdown of the county administration building, and no outside observers, not even the press, were allowed to watch the ballots being counted. And an enterprising young reporter named Erica Solvig, who now writes for the Palm Springs Desert Sun, was then writing for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And when Warren County hadn't reported their votes at midnight, she drove up there to find out why not. And she found the building locked down and surrounded by police cars, bomb-sniffing dogs. And she told me on the phone that she was still observing ballots being brought in the back door at 12:30 in the morning. That would be from the northeast corner. That's the same thing the Board of Elections director told me as well. Erica did look into the planning of it. And she was able to obtain emails between two county officials, one of whom was the director of building services, planning this phony Homeland Security alert 8 days in advance. Even the wording on the signs that would be posted on the county building to keep unwanted persons out. 5 days before the election, the lockdown was approved behind closed doors by the county commissioners. A couple of days before the election, the Board of Elections was notified there was going to be a lockdown. I found that out with a personal interrogation of the director. In very friendly tones, of course. I wanted her to talk. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a word for this sort of behavior. It is called conspiracy. And we have an eyewitness who drew a map, a hand-drawn map of the lay of the land showing what they did. They brought these ballots to the building services storage facility under the auspices of one of those co-conspirators. And those ballots were there for 3 or 4 hours after being cast at the polls and before they were brought into the Board of Elections. And through ballot rotation, they were able to rig the election. And this is the only thing that's consistent with the election results. They would take a certain number of ballots from each precinct and move them one precinct up the list, a batch of ballots punched for Kerry, and turn them into votes for Bush. Now people split their tickets. It's going to affect the entire Democratic ticket because all those two-person races are going to reverse for the ballots that are moved. But not everybody who voted for Kerry voted Democratic for the other offices. So he's damaged more severely than the other Democratic candidates. And what happens? He gets fewer votes than down-ticket candidates, including Ellen Connolly. And ballot initiatives don't rotate. Yes is above no in every precinct. So the constitutional amendment prohibiting gay marriage or anything resembling it doesn't get changed. The votes just get shifted to other precincts. And lo and behold, there were thousands of ballots punched for homosexual marriage and counted for George W. Bush. More than 50% of the ballots punched for gay marriage were counted for Bush in Warren County. I don't know anybody who believes that really happened. But we do owe it to Erica Solvik for doing exactly what you asked, to look at the, what led up to it. She's the one who proved it was a conspiracy. Yeah. You can do a public records request to look at the tapes, and how long does that take?
Well, they have 10 days to respond, and usually they extend it by 17 days. Their response is they extend it 17 days.
Right.
But they have to have, the results have to be certified within 28 days.
That was my question. So what they're trying to do is stretch it out to beyond the date that that the election would be certified. Right. Yeah. In the presidential election, it took 66 days before the votes were actually counted on the floor of the House. About half of the Ohio counties were already shredding evidence before then. 56 out of 88 counties destroyed at least some elections records, mainly unused ballots, and some of them within 60 days. Yeah?
I heard early on that
lawsuit, Moss versus Bush, was dismissed shortly after the Congress certified that Bush had been elected. We never got a hearing, we never got to depose witnesses or engage in discovery. Another lawsuit was filed in 2006, King Lincoln versus Blackwell. And through this lawsuit, in which I filed an 18-page declaration containing my preliminary findings of ballot tampering in 11 counties, Judge Algernon Maudley issued a federal court order to protect the ballots from destruction. They could have been destroyed after 22 months by federal law and state law. As it turned out, of course, most counties had destroyed some records already. But we believe we have rescued 90% of the voted ballots in Ohio. We know that 600,000 at least were destroyed, half of them in Montgomery County where Dayton is located. And we know that at least 1 million unused ballots were destroyed in Ohio. But I think that was a major victory to be able to protect any of the evidence. And it's now in the possession of Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner. And it makes my work replicable. People can go into her office with a records request and look at these ballots and see that I am telling the truth and that these photographs are real. You may disagree with some of my interpretations when you read the book, but the evidence is real, and we went through a lot to collect it. And that lawsuit is not dismissed, and I still cling to a slender hope that it will actually lead to the interrogation of witnesses under oath and maybe eventually to indictment. All of this information early on, we didn't get to look at the ballots until 2006. The first section of my book is entitled Moss versus Bush. That is the information that the Ohio Supreme Court had in December 2004, and John Conyers had it as well. In fact, he did rely on some of my work in his book and in his challenge of the election. As to why there's no hearings now, I don't know. I can't answer the question. I would love to testify before John Conyers now that I have so much more evidence than we had 4 years ago. Motive means an opportunity and no penalty for cheating. Of course it's going to happen again. And I'm not going to reveal what I think about any presidential candidates, but I observe that Barack Obama's top 2 constituencies, inner city African Americans and liberal arts college students, are the most easily targeted and disenfranchised. And I really think they need to get a grip on this. As far as conspiracies go, it doesn't always take a lot of people. One example was the pre-punched ballots. That wasn't done by the boards of elections. They didn't have complicit members in 8 different counties doing the same rigging scheme. This was done before the ballots arrived at the board of elections, and could have been done by one person in a factory. And the ballot rotation was known. Everybody knew which candidates were going to be listed where. This wasn't hard to do. You could figure out which precincts you could rig most easily, and the voting patterns are known. That's public record. Another example, in Butler County, southwestern Ohio. This is the county that gave Bush his biggest margin. He won it by 54,000 votes officially, almost half his statewide margin. When we were photographing ballots, a ranking employee of the Butler County Board of Elections volunteered this information to us. The punch cards have always worked well for us. The tabulators have always worked well in the past. But for some reason, though we've always done our own programming, on the morning of Election Day, an ES&S technician arrived unannounced and reprogrammed all 6 of our tabulators.
Was certified code or uncertified code?
Doesn't matter. I don't know, why was he tampering with the tabulators in Butler County? Because they didn't have anybody on the Board of Elections to rig it for them? They didn't have enough counties rigged to ensure the re-election of George W. Bush? And then they would have to go into the ballot room after the fact and rig the ballots to get them to match the rigged tabulator count, and that's exactly what we found. We would find sometimes 50 ballots for Bush at the top of the deck. In one case, we found 212 consecutive ballots for Bush at the middle of the deck. That's what you would expect if you take 50 ballots out of the deck and replace them with 50 Bush ballots and forget to shuffle the cards. That's how they used to rig lever machines in Detroit. They would start it at plus 50 for their guy and minus 50 for the other guy, and that's probably what they did with the tabulators in Butler County. And then the total number of ballots cast comes out right. The Board of Elections diligently checks the voter signature books to make sure the numbers all match, except they don't look at the ballots. They looked at everything else, God bless them, but they never looked at the ballots. It only took one person to rig Butler County. One person. Okay. Yep. You want me to address it too?